Good afternoon, and today we're going to be learning about the Torah reading of Re'eh. Re'eh is the fourth Torah reading in the book of Deuteronomy, but as we know, that the Torah reading that we read that not only has to do with the actual Torah reading, but there's also, as it refers to, it connects the upcoming month of Elul, and Elul is a time that we prepare for the high holy days. It's a time where we get ready to greet and to be judged on the time of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. As we know, the time of Elul is an opportune time when God is there listening to our prayers, but also it's a time for us to correct and enforce and reinforce ourselves in the three aspects of Torah, Tshuva, Tefillah, and Tzedakah, repentance, prayer, and charity. So how much more so the Torah reading of Re'eh has that correlation and connection with the ideas of Elul. Many times people think that religious people are, so to speak, angry at God for making so many laws, taking away our ability to enjoy, if you want to call, the physical pleasures of the world. Why does there have to be the constant challenge, the constant struggle of our natural inclinations that we would want to enjoy, so to speak, the different pleasures of the world, but because we are religious and we follow a greater authority, therefore we deny, so to speak, from ourselves these pleasures of the physical world. The question sometimes even is reinforced when somebody looks around the world and they say, well, look, those that are not following, as in the words of King Solomon, Derech Rishayim Tzleicha, the ways of the wicked seemingly are successful. Those that are conniving, immoral, seemingly are the ones that are living the high life. And sometimes we ask ourselves, what is it? Why is it that it is so difficult, or why do we have that challenge? Why does God deny us, if you want to call it, from achieving and appreciating the pleasures of the world? The question sometimes even gets even more difficult as we come to the month of Elul. The month of Elul that we put ourselves in a very serious modality, a time where we have to reflect and take into account of what we've done. But where does the month of Elul come from? Where does it start? Right after the summer months, when everybody's really enjoying themselves, out, relaxing, and all of a sudden you're going from a very relaxed and joyful time to a more tense mode as you become closer to the high holidays. How do we look at this? How do we view it? And how do we understand this idea of achieving and growing spiritually and not feeling bad, so to speak, that we're losing out on the physical things in the world? They say a story about once the two brothers, the great tzaddikim, the great righteous people, Reb Zusha of Anipali, and the brother of Reb Elimelech were having a conversation. Reb Zusha asks his brother Melech, Elimelech, how did you allow Adam to eat from the tree of knowledge? Reb Elimelech looks at him and says, like, why is this my fault now? He was thousands of years before us. So he says, didn't you know that Adam, mysticism tells us that Adam has every single soul within him. He was the first human being, so all souls and all humans that came were in Adam. That means you were part of Adam at the time, and you should have told him, you know what, you can wait the 3 hours, you don't have to eat from the tree of knowledge. God said don't have it, you can't have it. Zusha, his brother, tells him, Elimelech turns to his brother and says, listen here, I purposely did not tell Adam not to eat from the tree of knowledge. Because you know why? Or else the rest of his life and the rest of humanity, we would have been thinking, if only I would have eaten from the tree of knowledge. Who knows what it would have tasted like? Maybe I should have eaten from that. Maybe I should have listened. And I missed out on the opportunity. Isn't that what physical life is all about? Isn't that when we look at the world and we enjoy the pleasures? When we see a sale and say, oh, I should buy it now because if God forbid I'll leave it on the shelf, what's going to happen? It may go up in price and you won't buy it, so therefore you don't need it. So why do I have to buy it now also? No, but I have to buy it just in case I need it. I have to experience what's on my bucket list just in case I don't want to lose out on the opportunities. And therefore, we ate from it, we tasted it, And guess what? Did it help us? Did we become better because of it? And we realized that there's nothing good, that something, just because it looks so good from a distance, doesn't mean that it's really good. Some people will argue, materialistic people especially, today's day and age, culture will say, no, why would you leave it aside? Try it out. Everything, don't let an opportunity go to waste. You see something, enjoy it. You see a sale, grab it. Why worry about what could have happened or what it could have tasted like? So which one is it? How do we decide what's important, what's not? How do we decide what we should, what we shouldn't? How do we know what is right and what is wrong? If we look in this week's Torah reading, the first opening verse that Moshe tells the Jewish people, see, I've laid before you the blessings and the curses. And as we're going to explore today, looking at this verse, we'll be able to understand and we'll be able to appreciate what God has placed before us. That this materialistic wealth that we seemingly seem denied from, is it truly there for a purpose? What is its purpose? How do we make the choices? And what's the choice that God is actually giving us? Gives us a whole new perspective of how we view life, the blessings in life, the challenges in life, and the curses in life as well. And we will analyze this by looking at this week's Torah reading, especially the opening statement of this week's Torah reading. How much more so, we will analyze it by the first question that we see in this week's Torah reading, where Moshe seemingly seems to explore and extol the greatness of the curses that God is giving the Jewish people. He almost looks at it as a positive thing, not as a punishment to the choices that the people make, but almost parallel to the blessings that God is giving the people. And the question is, how is that possible? So let's start from the beginning. Let's back up a little bit. For the past 3 weeks in the book of Deuteronomy, we were talking about Moshe's rebuke to the Jewish people, starting from the first section of the Devarim, telling them about all the different episodes that they've gone through in different places that they've encountered, coming to the second Torah reading of Eschan, reminding them of the Ten Commandments and the commitments, and to last week's Torah reading to the sin of the golden calf and the other trials and tribulations that Moshe has encountered with them for the past 40 years. From now, for the next 3 Torah readings, if we look, we will see that Moshe moves now to practicality. Enough with the rebuke, but now he moves to action, telling the Jewish people about the mitzvahs that they have to do. And if you look in the next 3 Torah readings, in the Torah reading of Re'eh, there is 55 mitzvahs. The Torah reading of Shoftim, which is next week's Torah reading, there's 41 mitzvahs. And then in Kiseitze, in 2 weeks' time, there are 74 mitzvahs. That means if you take these 3 Torah readings, there's 170 mitzvahs, which makes up a third, 30% of all this. It makes up 30% of all the mitzvahs given to the Jewish people, 613 commandments. 170 of them are in these Torah readings. So Moshe over here, if you look, is now telling Jewish people the practical application of everything that they've learned, experienced, and seen throughout the time of the desert, where they're about to go into the land of Israel. What does this mean practically in their life? How are they going to apply it? As an introduction to all the mitzvahs that he told the Jewish people, he gives the opening verse in this week's Torah reading. The opening verse of telling them what life is all about. One of the commentators on the Talmud, Rabbi Yosef Bechor Shor, known as a great commentator of the Tosfos, says as follows. Up until now, Moshe was giving the Jewish people rebuke, telling them about everything they've done wrong, everything they've gone through, and how they're going to be able to change when they come into the land of Israel. And now he tells them about the observance of the commandments, of what they're going to be doing. And he tells them as follows. You know what you've done wrong. You know what you have to do right. You're going to see in front of you blessings. You choose the path of blessings. Wonderful. You don't, you get the opposite effect as well. Moshe is explaining to the Jewish people something very clearly here. Life is 2 lanes, but it's not the same 2 lanes going the same direction. There's one lane going this way and one lane going the other way. You don't, just because there's two lanes, it doesn't mean they're parallel to one another. Just because there's two lanes, it doesn't mean it's Coke and Diet Coke. Less sugar, more sugar. Dairy, non-dairy. They're two completely different animals. They're two completely different paths. One's a path to blessings, one's a path to curses. One's a path to one way, and the other way you're going the opposite direction. You're not going the same direction. They're two opposing lanes. Even more so, Moshe tells the Jewish people, not only are there two opposing lanes, but one is a lane of blessing, even though right now it may not look like blessing. And you may say, look, all these people doing things wrong are being very successful. He tells them one is chayim, one is life. Ubacharta b'chayim, you'll choose life. Moshe tells them the need that there's something you're not going to see the experience immediately. You may not see that immediate enjoyment from following the commandments, from following the rules. Sometimes hurts, sometimes pinches. But there's a long-term goal. You have to see it, the long-term effect. The Medrash puts it this way. The Medrash gives the following parable and says, Moshe tells the Jewish people that there are two paths, two ways. And you have the choice. But I tell you, ubacharta b'chayim, choose life. He says, imagine there's a person walking on the road, comes to a fork in the road, and he wants to know which way to go. There's one road that he sees there are thorns. But after you get through all the thorns and the bumpiness of the road, it's a beautiful, smooth road ahead. The other one, it's beautiful, smooth in the beginning, but then the rest of the road is full of thorns. Which one are you going to choose? You can either try to get through all the thorns, but the moment you get through it, you know it's beautiful, smooth sailing from there. Or you could say, I'm going to take the smooth sailing first, but then the rest of the ride is going to be bumpy and thorny. This is what Moshe is telling the Jewish people. Yes, you see the evil people are successful right now. Yes, you see people who are immoral, unrighteous, and doing the wrong thing, and seemingly they're very successful, and you say, wow, maybe I should jump on that bandwagon. That's the smooth road, but later on it becomes thorny. And the righteous people, yes, they may have a trouble, difficulty, they have to withhold from certain pleasures. It's thorny, but there's a smooth ride ahead. The Gra, Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna, explains that this is, if you look at the contrast of the difference of the way Moshe addresses the Jewish people in this week's Torah reading. When he says, look, behold, I have given you blessings and curses, and choose life. While in the Torah reading of Nitzavim, in a few weeks' time, right before his passing, he says, you stand here today, and he goes explicitly, life and good, blessings and the death and curses. Why does he use life and death and over here blessings and curses? And the Vilna Gaon explains as follows. Is because life and death is something you can see clearly the difference. Something's alive and something's dead. You see it right there in front of you. While blessings and curses, you don't see it immediately. The immediate reaction is not noticeable. You need patience to appreciate the blessings. Sometimes something that can look like a great blessing, it ends up being to a terrible curse. And sometimes something that seems like a curse and a punishment ends up being the greatest blessing. For blessings and curses, patience is needed. And therefore, when Moshe addresses the Jewish people today concerning the commandments, he is telling them, yes, you need the patience, the fortitude to be able to see it. It may be thorny, but eventually the road gets smooth. So when Moshe is addressing the Jewish people today, what is he telling the Jewish people in the beginning of our Torah reading? Behold, God gave before you the blessings and the curses. The blessings should you follow the commandments, and the curses should you not follow the commandments. And over here, the questions that we have in the first verse of this week's Torah reading is three of them. Number one, the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, Reb Chaim ben Attar, asks the following question. Why does he use the terminology re'eh, see? Not only does he say see, but he says anochi, I, singular term. Using a terminology that the Ten Commandments started with. Anochi, I am God who took you out of Egypt. And what is he referencing to? Curses that make God come to the people. And what's the next word he says? Noisein, to give. Generally, when somebody gives something, in the words of the Talmud is hanoisem b'anyof, one who gives generously. Why is it used in the terminology of curses? Why does he, so just to recap, number one, why does he say the word see? Why does he say I, singular term? And why is he giving if it's curses? The question even becomes more obvious, not only because the very fact that he's referring to his curses here, and he's using a terminology of giving, but if you look throughout the book of Deuteronomy, when Moshe addresses the Jewish people about A, the rebuke, and B, about the commandments that they're going to have to give and commit to, he always uses the terminology Shema, listen. Last week's Torah reading we spoke about, V'hoyim Shema Tishmu, the second section of the Shema, if and you shall listen to the commandments that God gives you. 2 weeks ago he said Shema Yisrael, hear O Israel. Throughout the book of Deuteronomy we have the word Shema mentioned 92 times. Most of the Torah reading we say Shema Yisrael numerous times. The Moshe tells the Jewish people, listen up Jews, this is what you got to do. Why over here does he change from listening to seeing? More so in Judaism, in contrast to any other religion, is that we are dependent on listening than on seeing. We're more of a listening nation than a visual type nation. For example, in the book of Deuteronomy 2 weeks ago, when Moshe reminds them about the episode of getting the 10 Commandments, Moshe told them, you heard God's voice, but a vision you didn't see. You saw a voice, you heard a voice, but you didn't see a vision, you didn't see an image. We don't know what God looks like. God doesn't have an image. In contrast to the other religions, the pagans, they were making idols like the sun, the moon. The Greeks, they were making always the image of humans. Everybody had these visualizations of what they believed God would look like, or to whatever their gods were. Judaism shied away from that. Judaism doesn't give us any visions. Judaism is always about listening, hearing, attentiveness, understanding. And over here, what does Moshe tell the Jewish people? Re'eh, see, I have given you. To looking at it a step further even, besides all those questions, when the Targum, which is the Aramaic translation on this verse, translates and says, behold, I've given before you the blessings, and uses the terminology for Aramaic loitin, which means curse. Layit, loitin, which means to curse. The blessings and curses. There's another Aramaic translation which some attribute to the great author of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel, who says, behold, I've given before you blessings and the alternative. Now, what does that mean until the alternative? While yes, Unclus translates curses as a curse for something that they didn't do, the other translation sounds like an alternative. What does it mean, alternative? You can have Coke or Diet Coke. It's an alternative. It doesn't sound like an opposite, a different track. It sounds like it's almost coming from the same place. It's giving the same credit. How is that? Since when is a curse an alternative to a blessing? It's the opposite of a blessing. Alternative means I can pick one or I can pick the other. I have a choice. It's like somebody saying, rich, wealth is the alternative to poverty. It's not the alternative, it's the opposite extremes. Being sick is the alternative to being healthy. It's not the alternative, it's the opposite. You don't choose. Nobody would choose to be sick over being healthy. Nobody would choose to be in poverty and over wealth. So why does the Targum, the explanation of the Aramaic of Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel translate curses to mean the alternative of blessings, making it sound like there is no big difference between the two. 2 lanes on a highway, go in the right lane, go in the left lane. When really they're 2 opposing lanes. They're going the opposite ways of traffic. The Rebbe, in addressing this, brings up this question, and he explains, as we'll get into today, that really what is the similarity? What is the common denominator? What is the striking way that blessings and curses have a certain commonality to the extent that they're called the alternatives and not opposites, when seemingly there are 2 opposite opposing factors. And we will see and learn from here the message that's behind this positive, seemingly energy behind the curses that Moshe is saying. So let's go back to our first question. Why does Moshe say I and see? So the Reb Chaim ben Attar, as we mentioned, asked the question, and he gives the following answer. And he says an interesting answer, seemingly out of the box kind of answer. And he says that really Moses was referring to himself. That when Moshe was telling the Jewish people, see, I have given before you blessings and curses, Moshe was not talking about God, but he was talking about himself. Meaning that where is Moshe coming from? Let's put this in order of the sections. He just finished rebuking the Jewish people for 3 Torah readings, right before his passing. When Moshe is rebuking the Jewish people, it's not that he's coming to threaten them, to warn them, to tell them you're a bunch of no-goodniks. But actually Moshe was showing the Jewish people that he is there with them in their troubles, teaching us a very important lesson. Don't give people advice. Become part of their problem, and only then can you give them a solution. Don't stand from an outsider, rebuking and saying you should have done this, you should have done that. But become part of the same fabric, become part of the problem, so to speak, realize that you can actually be empathetic with them, and then find a solution for it. Generally, when a person gives rebuke, they say, oh, you're a bunch of goodniks. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? You should have done this. You should have done that. Coming as a Monday morning quarterback. Like we were yesterday. You should have been part of playing the game, and then you will come and tell us how to play better. And therefore, Moshe comes along to the Jewish people and says, Re'ei, see, anoichi, I have the same challenge. I have the same problem. I'm not considered Mr. Privileged and coming to tell you that you should behave differently. Moshe says, I'm not an angel. I have my challenges. I have my differences. Yes, I was born into the palace of Pharaoh, but there were people that hated me, people that were jealous of me. I had people that wanted to kill me. I didn't believe at first that God wanted to take the Jewish people out of Egypt. I had my questions. And therefore Moshe comes along and tells the Jewish people, from his challenges, from his own experiences, he says, believe me, the choice is free. But the price you pay for it is a way of difference. One's a blessing and one's a curse. Moshe tells the Jewish people, I've gone through making those choices as well. And I can tell you, yes, the choice is free. And yes, you can see there's all different 2 lanes going on here. But the price you're going to pay for one choice doing the right thing will be a blessing. And the price you're going to pay, while it may take a heavy toll on you, may be curses. And it's not that simple. And this is the lesson Moshe was telling every single Jew. People by nature are judgmental. We wake up in the morning, we see the car a person drives, the clothes the person wears, the things the person says. We all of a sudden become judgmental about that individual, and we have what to say and how they should have done it and where they were to went. We're driving behind somebody. Well, he's going too slow, he's going too fast, he should turn, he shouldn't, should put on. We have so many opinions about what everybody else should do. Sit in their cars, sit together with them, go through their things, and only then are you able to rebuke them. Only then are you able to recommend what they should do. Don't speak in the name of justice, righteousness. This is the right thing you should be doing. Take into consideration who you're talking to, what you're saying. Live with them for a moment. Be empathetic. And only then can you really respond and understand what they're going through. The second Chabad Rebbe once was having a private audience. And in the middle of having this whole private audience, he stopped short. He says he needs a break. They stopped, and only a half hour later did he continue. Later on, one of his assistants asked, what happened? Why did you need to stop? So he says, every time a person comes and asks me a question, I cannot answer the question unless I put myself in that person's position. I have to clothe myself. I have to find within myself that issue, and only then can I find a solution to the problem. And over here, a person came to me, and asking a problem, a question, and I couldn't find it within myself. So I had to wait and look and search and dig deep. So I can put myself in that person's shoes, and only then can I give him a solution to that person's problem. The same idea we find. There's a halacha, there's a code in Jewish law. We read about it in the book of Numbers concerning the red heifer. That the one who sprinkles the red heifer, he himself becomes impure. And the question that many ask, how does that make sense? If the waters of the red heifer make a person who has been impure for 7 days because he touched a dead corpse, whatever it may be, and it makes him pure, how does it make the person who sprinkled it impure? Make up your mind. Is this cleansing waters? Is impurification waters? Do these waters cleanse people or make them impure? How does the same water who made somebody impure make somebody pure, make somebody else impure? How does that work? It's like saying every time you go get a throat culture, you should have strep. The doctor should get strep. How does that work out? Or anytime the doctor gives a prescription for whatever the virus it may be, he himself should get the virus. How does that happen? And therefore, what it means over here is that how does a person make somebody else impure or pure? Is that you have to become part of them. You have to be able to become impure to be able to purify somebody else. That means you have to be able to reach in their level to a certain extent. Now, it's not the same level of impurity. That person becomes impure for 7 days. And this person is only impure for 1 day. But the price to pay for the Kohen to be able to purify another Jew meant that he has to also get dirty a little bit. If somebody's drowning in the water, you can't just throw a life vest to them and say, okay, work your way out. You got to jump into the water and save the person. That's the only way you're going to save the person. If you don't get wet, that person's not getting saved. You can't stand from the aloof and tell people what to do. You want to be able to bring people up, you got to go down and pick them up. The kunz is, the specialty is, that you only, maybe yourself you get dirty only for a little bit, for 1 day impurity, but not 7 days, not to become influenced by the impurity. But you got to go get down and dirty to be able to get to the foundation, to be able to pick the thing up. There was once a rabbi, shliach, who wrote a book about answering questions about people had about Torah and mitzvahs and its observances. And he sent it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe responded to him and said, concerning his booklet, when a person asks a question, you're responding to the person, not to the question. And you can see this actually in the Rebbe's responses in many different letters, that the same exact question, each person will get a different kind of answer. All very similar, but a different angle, different twist. Because the Rebbe answers the person, not the question. The same idea is also when people ask questions, we have to remember, we have to look at the individual, not at what they're asking. They're masking it with a different type of question. So what we see with the Orach Chaim over here is teaching us, and what this verse is telling us the idea, is that if we want to be able to uplift, rebuke, and change somebody, you have to be able to go down and dirty, get into the nitty-gritty of what the individual needs, and only then can you answer the question. How do we see this? Because Moses tells the Jewish people, you want to know the difference between light and dark? You want to know the difference between blessings and curses? I know. I also have that challenge. I also are struck with that dilemma. What do I choose? Yes, the choice is free, but the price is very expensive. That's the explanation of the Orach Chaim. But that's not the simple interpretation, seemingly. Simple interpretation is that he's talking about God. So what does it really mean? So the Hasidic interpretation takes it a step further and explains that Moshe really over here is doing something amazing, something out of the box completely. And he is giving the Jewish people a gift by lifting the screen, showing them what happens behind the scenes. Moshe is telling them, what you see on the outside, there's something deeper and something more happening behind the scenes. In order to help the Jewish people, make it easier for them to make that choice between good and bad, curses and blessings, Moshe is not just telling them a warning, make sure you do the right thing. but he also gives them the opportunity to see what is these curses? What are these desires? Why do we have these desires? Why are they so tempting? And what's happening here? And Moshe explains the following. When you see a real temptation for something that's immoral, materialistic, or evil, you have to recognize that this is all just a show. It's all just a presentation. And all it is an alternative to blessings. Correct. When he talks about alternative to blessing is because klipa, evil in itself, is just an external. Its job is to be, so to speak, the parallel, the enemy of holiness. And this is what Moshe is telling the Jewish people. Re'eh, see, anoichi, I. He chooses a terminology, anoichi, the same word that God says when he gives the Jewish people the Ten Commandments. What he's telling the Jewish people is that yes, these curses, which are curses, are given by the same God who gave you the Ten Commandments, who gave you the opportunity for blessings. And he gives you the curses as a gift. What does that mean as a gift? That means the very fact that you have a desire, the very fact that you have a want to be able to do something that's wrong, comes from the highest place of darkness. But the very fact that you have the opportunity to do something that is wrong and curses means that you have just as an equal opportunity to do something that is right and get the greatest of blessings. Meaning, imagine I were to tell you that if you do everything that's right, you have all of a sudden you're going to be a billionaire, you're going to have health until 120, and everything goes good. And if you, God forbid, something's wrong, lightning strikes and you're gone. Is that freedom of choice? Is that a free choice? No. Of course you'll choose to do the right thing because you see the exact blessings happening to you, so therefore you will always choose the right thing. What is Moshe telling the Jewish people? The same energy that there exists in evil, the same temptation that there exists in something which is wrong, that same temptation exists in what's blessing. Why? Because there has to be the parallel. There's alternatives. They're exactly parallel to one another. Good and bad, blessings and curses, or else there wouldn't be free choice. But at the same time, the whole point of the ambition behind the evil to get you to do what's wrong is that you shouldn't do it. And you should choose, ultimately, the blessing. That means the whole purpose, he's showing them behind the scenes. Yes, you see there's such a passion to do something that's wrong. But you know why the passion's there to do something that's wrong? Because you shouldn't do it and pick what's right. And imagine the reward that he becomes even greater. The Alter Rebbe brings an example of this in Tanya, in chapter 9. The Alter Rebbe says an example that says that a king wanted to test or wanted to prove his son, who's the prince, how he has to withstand the challenges of life. So the king hired a harlot to try to seduce the young prince. But the harlot itself didn't want that the prince should fall into the trap. It was only doing its job. The harlot wanted that the prince should overcome the seduction and not become full prey to it. The same idea is also God giving us all the different challenges of the world and all the different things that are there. Is there to be able to show us that we are able to overcome that temptation, overcome those challenges. What Moshe was doing is showing them what happens behind the scenes. When you know the end of the plot, it's easier for you to get through the scenes. You're not worried of what's going to happen at the end. So when Moshe tells the Jewish people, Re'eh, see what's going on. See in front of you. See the choices of good and bad, blessings and curses. What is he telling them? See. That means don't just fall for what's in front of your eyes and say, oh wow, it's so difficult. The materialism is overwhelming. He says, see, this is only a show. Pull up the curtain and you'll see that it really wants you to do the right thing and there's a blessing right behind it. The whole point of it is that you should pick the right thing. You'll notice that as much as you enjoy something, there's even a greater enjoyment of saying, you know what, I hold myself back. You know that chocolate cake, that 7-layer cake, or that chocolate cream that's saying, please taste me? And then you say, you know what, I'm not going to have it. When do you feel really good? If it was a piece of stale bread, what's the big deal to say, I'm not going to eat it? But it was a nice, creamy, juicy chocolate cake that had all the trimmings on it, with a little ice cream and whipped cream on the side. And you said, I'm going to hold myself back. Then you feel much better about yourself. This is what Moshe is telling the Jewish people. The greater the temptation, what's even greater is, then that you're able to withhold yourself from that temptation, that greatest pleasure. The Chazal, the sages tell us a story, and I've said the story once before, a great story nonetheless, about one of the greatest sages that are mentioned in the Talmud, by the name of Mar Ukva. And just to tell you the story in short about Mar Ukva was a person that lived in Babylonia, and to the extent it said that his face was radiant like the sun. And the story is brought in the Tractate of Sanhedrin, and then brought again in Rab Nissim Goyen, one of the commentators of the Goyenim, bring it in great length, and says that Mar Ukva was a very wealthy, successful businessman. And one time he saw a woman by the name of Chana, and he really had a desire to be with her. But Chana was married. And because she was married, he knew he couldn't be with her. He had such a great desire to be with her that he even became sick because of it. Sick that he was bedridden. The doctor said maybe she can just come, just say hello to him. Doesn't have to do anything with her, just that he should be able to bring him back to life a little bit. But the rabbi said, absolutely not. This is just feeding into the seduction, feeding into his temptation. The rabbi said 0, because when it comes to laws of promiscuity, you have to go to the furthest extreme. This is one of the cardinal laws that we say that even a person has to give his life for it, and absolutely not. He can have no relationship with her in any shape or form. Eventually, he became better. Meanwhile, however, Chana's husband got stuck with a lot of loans, owed a lot of people money, and ended up in prison. She would go and visit him every single day in prison, her husband, and her husband was not patient with the very fact that didn't exactly take the blame on himself that he ended up in prison. And he's telling his wife that you're not doing enough to be able to get me out of prison. So she's thinking, what should she do? So he tells her, you know what? There's a rich guy in town. His name is Mar Ukva. Go to him and ask him for money to get me out of prison. She knew about his desire for her. She said, how can I go to him? This is going to be bad stuff for me. And she refused. And she dragged her feet until finally one day her husband said, go to Mar Ukva. He didn't know that there was this problem. He said, go to Mar Ukva, get the money from him, at least I can get out of prison. She went to the wealthiest man in town. His name was Mar Ukva. He wrote her a check, but he couldn't withhold himself. And he asked her, will you be with me? She was dependent on the money. This was her lowest point of her life. And she said to him the following, technically, I should be beholden to you. You helped me out. But I ask you, please get a hold of yourself and govern your inclination. Get yourself in order and do not fall after your temptations. He wanted to be with her. But after she said what she said, all of a sudden he put himself in that position. And he was able to overcome his evil inclination, and he told her, go in peace. She went to the check with her husband. He asked her, what did it take for you to get the money from Mar Ukva? And she said what happened. And she said that he was strong, what she told him, and he didn't do anything to her. And therefore she was able to get the money. He didn't believe it. He says, how is it possible? He gave you such an amount of money and you did not have to fall for him? You were not seduced by him? And you did not have to fall prey to his temptations? He didn't believe it. And he separated from his wife. One time he saw Rabbi Akiva, who was riding together with the students, and he jumped off his horse to go greet Mar Ukva. So he goes over to Rabbi Akiva and says, Rabbi Akiva, how dare you give credit to such an individual who caused such rift between a husband and wife, who went with a woman who was married? Rabbi Akiva said, what? You're making a mistake. You see this Marukva? He has a fire of heaven on top of him, coming from him, because of what he did, because of his strength that he overcame his evil inclination. He came to his wife, and he made up, and he was recognized what he did was wrong. From then, they called Marukva Nosson de Nitzutzah. Nosson, his first name was Nosson, who had a fire upon him, that he had the sparks of flames of him, because he was able to overcome his evil inclination. The question is, what did she tell him that was able to be so transformative to a person that almost died from the temptation that he had for a woman? And over here, where he had the opportunity in his own right, and he didn't do it. What changed? And over here is what Moses told the Jewish people, is what this woman Hannah told Marukva. She showed him what's behind the scenes. Meaning, she says, you have a moment here in your life to acquire the world to come. You have this opportunity. Yes, you can have a material pleasure, which is momentarily, and today it's here, and then it'll be past. Or you can withhold yourself, and because of that, your reward in the world to come will be great. Because now when you overcome this great temptation means that you have a great aura to you. You have a great holiness to you that you're able to overcome and do what God wants. And with that, he was able to overcome his temptation. What Hannah showed him was that this temptation that you have for promiscuity, this temptation that you have for me, it is only the klipa, it's the evil using its greatest strength to show you that you have a greater strength to overcome it. In other words, Freud always believed that people deep down are selfish. He always believed that the individual deep down is evil. It's only that we, for our conveniences in the world, therefore we overcome it with different things. And only later did his student Viktor Frankl prove that really the individual is good, because he saw in the concentration camps where people had nothing for themselves, they were still helping one another. And this is what the Torah tells us. That the truth is that every individual deep down is really good and wants to choose what is good. The only problem is that sometimes we have this veneer, the temptations of materialism, the seduction of the evil inclination that wants to make us choose other things. And tries to convince us and persuade us. And then we think that if we're going to fall prey, if we're going to do just this one time, I'll feel so much better. Why should I just leave it on the shelf? Why should I just leave it alone? It's looking so good. It's beautiful. The fruit tastes so much. I should taste it. Just one taste. And that's it. But what is it telling us? That the greater the temptation, the greater the reward. The greater the temptation, the greater we have the choice to be able to withhold ourselves from the temptation. And this is what Moshe was telling the Jewish people. Moshe is telling the Jewish people. He's telling them, look, you have the curses and the blessings. Why are they both parallel? They're both the same. It's like Coke and Diet Coke. What? They look exactly the same. Not only that, they look just as tempting. They're alternatives. You can choose one or the other. Not only that, one is bringing out the revelation and the greatness of the other. The very fact that this is so strong, that the curse is so tempting, means that the blessing is so great. And therefore Moshe tells them, see, he doesn't say listen like he uses in other terms. Because listening is not good enough. It's not enough that I should listen and understand and appreciate. You gotta see it. You gotta see that this, the source of where everything's from. You gotta see it to be able to appreciate it. You gotta see it to say, what you're seeing right now, this temptation, look through it. As if you have the X-ray vision to see that this is curse, is only a veneer, and behind it is really hiding the blessing that comes because of it. That this temptation, this challenge is so difficult, because there's really a greater reward that comes through it. What things do you have the most nachas from? What things do you have the most pleasure from? The things that you worked hardest for. The things that were most challenging. You say, wow, I was able to get through it. Because Moshe is telling the Jewish people, you have to see it. Don't just listen. You have to see what the future holds. Don't just look at things the way they are right now, but look for what they're going to bring. We see this even a little bit later in other places where the terminology, that you don't just get satisfied with what happened in the past. We're continuing, those that were online, we're just continuing what we said, that you don't just get satisfied with what you see right now, with just a very external, ethereal way of just looking at the world. But you have to look a little deeper into things, that the entire world was only created for one purpose, to serve God. And even if it may be something that looks evil at its core, just like Amalek, they're also there to be able to bring out the godliness in it. Like the words Goleh and Geula, which means exile and redemption. The only difference is an Aleph. Our job is to reveal the Aleph, to reveal the godliness with everything that is holy, within everything that's going on in the world. So as we stand right before the month of Elul, as we stand right before the time of the high holidays, we're getting into this era and the time of seriousness of preparing for the high holy days. We ask of God to see the Aleph, to see the revelation and everything of that exile, that we shouldn't have to struggle our way through the challenges to be able to see the great reward that comes from it. We should already see the reward even before we start with the coming of Mashiach, maybe now. Amen.